was a big Grover Cleveland fan, but anyway.
Did you see the reporting tonight in the Wall Street Journal that Trump is now talking to people about forming a third party, a Patriot Party?
I sure did.
I thought, well, the one really, really, really bright silver lining tonight for Democrats is that.
Go with God.
That's exactly right. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Last day, less than the last day. It's the last night. And it feels like a dark night. It is hard not to feel trepidatious about it now at the end, not only given what we have been through with this presidency, but also just given the terrible way it is ending. For the first time in the history of our country, there has not been a peaceful transfer of power between presidents. And the outgoing president tomorrow will not attend his successor's inauguration. He and the First Lady will not greet the next president and the next First Lady and show them around the White House and then ride down to the Capitol together for the swearing in, like even truculent, sore-losing presidents have done in the past. They just won't do it. Instead, did you know that President Trump is going to give a speech tomorrow? Seriously. He is leaving not long after dawn. Sunrise is at 7:23 a.m. tomorrow in Washington, D.C. The outgoing president is throwing himself a goodbye ceremony shortly thereafter that he is ordering members of the military to attend, which he can do because in the morning he will still technically be commander-in-chief. He will have a couple hundred service members there. They do not have a choice. And he may order one of the military bands to play for him as well. We'll see. There has been continuing reporting today that the White House is trying quite desperately to get other people who the president cannot order to be there to nevertheless show up there of their own accord tomorrow morning before he flies off to Florida. They really are apparently just using all their contact lists indiscriminately. Each invitation to the send-off the president is throwing for himself asks the recipient of the invitation to please bring with them 5 additional guests. And they are sending these invitations to everyone they have an email address for, apparently, including, we think by accident, a number of people who the president has loudly denounced as his enemies. People like Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House press secretary for 5 minutes, and John Kelly, former White House chief of staff, even John Bolton, his former national security advisor, who wrote a whole book about how terrible the president Trump was, and who the president then sicked the Justice Department on in response to that book. But oops, somehow John Bolton is now among those invited to come tomorrow to the president, to the party that the outgoing president is throwing for himself. And please, would he bring 5 friends with him? So we'll see how it goes early tomorrow. The president is leaving the White House roughly at dawn. We are advised that he really is planning on giving a speech, possibly kind of a long one, at this event that he is throwing for himself at Andrews Air Base. You know, there's a reason why former presidents don't give speeches on their successor's inauguration day, right? But yeah, that's what we are getting from the outgoing president. Because Mr. Trump is then just leaving and flying to Florida rather than taking any part in the inaugural ceremonies in Washington, responsibility is going to fall to the White House usher to welcome President Biden and the new First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, to the White House once Joe Biden is sworn in tomorrow at noon. The usher has to do it because the departing president won't. You know, I have found myself thinking over the past week or so, if Mr. Trump could have seen into the future to this day, if in 2015, when he was thinking about running for president, you know, if he could have picked one day in the future and picked this day, the final day of his presidency, to know what it was going to be like this day, to know what he would have wrought and brought down upon himself by this day, do you think he would have run in the first place? I mean, honestly, don't think about how he thinks about the country. We still don't understand that, but we know about how he thinks about himself and his own interests. And he is leaving office with the main legitimately open question on the last day and the last night of his presidency being, will he try to pardon himself to avoid future federal prosecution and potential federal imprisonment for his crimes? He is leaving office tomorrow with this conundrum of how he's going to keep himself out of prison. He couldn't even pull a Richard Nixon in the end, because apparently he does not trust that his vice president would pardon him if he resigned, like Ford at least did for Nixon. He couldn't even count on that, because he can't trust his vice president to do that for him, not after he sicked a murderous mob on his vice president less than 2 weeks ago in the Hang Mike Pence attack on the Capitol that he directly incited. The president leaves office with his second Senate impeachment trial still pending. No president has ever been convicted in a Senate impeachment trial. Donald Trump stands a real chance of it, though. He leaves office with his campaign chairman and his deputy campaign chairman, convicted felons. With his most long-standing political advisor, Roger Stone, a convicted felon. With his campaign manager, Steve Bannon, under federal indictment and awaiting trial. With a criminal investigation of himself and his business underway in New York, and possibly another criminal investigation pending against him soon in the state of Georgia. With the last 2 banks on earth that would still do business with him pledging now to never do so again. One of them closing his accounts and calling on him to resign the presidency. The other one is the one to which he has personally guaranteed over $300 million in outstanding loans, which are soon coming due, with no one having any sense of how he will possibly pay them. With his business interests cratering at home and across the globe, with a live question in play as to whether he will be the first president to ever face a lifetime legal ban on him ever running for office again. With even his wife leaving Washington with an approval rating nearly 20 points lower than any other first lady in history. She is the only first lady in history to be viewed on balance negatively by the American public. That's like a physical impossibility, but he's managed it somehow. His longtime fixer and lawyer is also not only now a convicted felon, he's one who has cooperated and is cooperating in an ongoing way with multiple ongoing investigations into the president, including the criminal bank fraud and tax fraud one that is ongoing in New York. His niece is suing him to get the inheritance she says he stole from her. He's soon going to be deposed in a defamation case brought by a woman who says he raped her and who says she saved a dress with his DNA on it to prove it. The company that was lined up to broker the sale of his now flagship property, his D.C. hotel, that company now refuses to be associated with him and will have nothing to do with the sale. The city where he was born and raised and lived his whole life before the White House, New York City, has canceled all its Trump Organization contracts. He, of course, in the middle of his one term in office, said good riddance to New York and moved to Florida, apparently out of some combination of spite and tax interests. But even still, his neighbors in Palm Beach, Florida, are asking that town to enforce zoning and tax rules in order to prevent him from actually moving in there full time. And the PGA won't put tournaments at his golf courses anymore. And he's banned from Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. And apparently they can't find anyone to come to the sore loser send-off that he's throwing himself at dawn on his last morning as president at an airbase after he was voted out after only one term. The only president in U.S. history to have ever lost the popular vote twice, to have been impeached twice. The only defeated incumbent president ever to use violence by his supporters to attack the U.S. government to try to force his continued hold on power. He leaves tomorrow at dawn, slinking out before the inauguration of the man who soundly beat him. He sneaks out early tomorrow as the only president in living memory to face the legitimate prospect of post-presidential conviction in the Senate and a lifetime ban on holding office and potential federal and state criminal charges in the courts. Other than that, how was the play, Mr. President? Was it worth it? If you could have seen today, if you 5 years ago could have fast forwarded to see me say that on TV, and it's all true. If you'd known how it would go by the end of it, would you still have done it? You will go down in history as unequivocally and inarguably the worst president in American history, with what may literally be the rap sheet to prove it. That's what you did. Glad you did it. Wish you could take it back. We do. So here's where we are.